Hello, hello, hello. Um, Good afternoon, everyone. I warmly welcome you all to the first technical session of the 76th International Communication Association Conference, hosted by Sister Nivedita University as a ICA regional hub, under the theme Communication and Inequalities in Context. We are delighted to have scholars, researchers, and faculty members and students joining us for this engaging academic session. A special welcome to all our paper presenters whose research contributions and insights enrich the scholarly conversation that define this conference. The title of this technical session is Negotiating Digital Cultures, Public Knowledge, and Social Inequalities in Contemporary Communication Contexts. Through a range of scholarly perspectives, this session explores how media shapes, reflects, and contests issues of marginality, inclusion, and representation in contemporary society. To guide us through today's proceedings, it is my pleasure to introduce our esteemed session chair, Dr. Buroshiva Dasgupta, a distinguished media professional and educated with over 5 decades of experience in journalism, media studies, and academic leadership. He has worked with leading national dailies such as The Statesman, The Economic Times, and The Financial Express, and has headed media departments at institutions including Manipal University, Karnavati University, and Sister Nivedita University. Professor Dasgupta has contributed extensively to journalism, television production, and media research with publications spanning media, society, and wildlife studies. A PhD from the University of Calcutta and alumnus of Presidency College, Kolkata. He has also lectured at universities in United States, Africa, and Singapore. He is the founding editor of two international research journals, Global Media Journal, India Edition, and Communication Online. The organizing committee is pleased to welcome Professor Das Gupta as the chair of this technical session and looks forward to valuable the insights of and discussion his expertise will bring. Now it is my privilege to invite Professor Shubhadeep Kormakar, academic instructor, Mass Communication and Journalism Department at Sister Nivedita University, to hand over and felicitate our esteemed session chair, Dr. Biroshiva Dasgupta. We extend our sincere gratitude for our chair to kindly agreeing to moderate this session. Before we begin this session, I would like to briefly outline a few presentation guidelines. Each presenter will allotted 7 minutes for their presentation with an additional 30 seconds of grace time. A warning bell will be rung at the 5-minute mark to indicate that 2 minutes remain. At the end of allotted time, the bell will ring twice, signaling that the presentation time has concluded. I kindly request all the presenters to adhere to the time limit to ensure the smooth and efficient conduct of the session. Thank you, and we look forward to your presentations. Without further delay, I now invite our session chair, Dr. Buroshiva Dasgupta, to take over the proceedings and begin the session.
May I start? Imagine a world where small infection or a routine surgery can become life-threatening. This is no longer a science fiction. This is the growing reality of antimicrobial resistance or AMR. Now, what is antimicrobial resistance? Antimicrobial resistance refers to the repeated use of antibiotics and the bacteria, viruses, fungi, parasites. Together we call microbes which are resistant to the antibiotics. Now, while we talk about antimicrobial resistance, we talk about hospitals, doctors, nurses, and many more. But behind this biological crisis lies an invisible challenge, inequalities in science communication. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Aditya Narayan Pal, a microbiology student, and I am here to present my paper titled Inequalities in Science Communication and Public Understanding of Antibiotics, Implications for Antimicrobial Resistance in India. Now, according to the World Health Reports, antimicrobial resistance is considered as the top 10 world health challenges in the world. Okay. According to the World Health Reports, antimicrobial resistance is considered as the top 10 world threat reports. And the AMR, according to the WHO reports in 2024, it is 1.27 million, and it is projected by 2050, it's 10 million, which is more than the cancer today. Can you imagine that? And it has more economic burden by 2050 in US, which is shown at $300 trillion. And in India, it is even more because the antimicrobial resistance, due to which the antibiotics are available in the counter and self-medication is available without prescription, and there is no strict drug regulation. So India's AMR burden by 2024 and 25, it's 2.9 million. And 85,000 to 1 lakh deaths estimated every year, and which roughly estimate about 15.7 deaths in India. And the GDP cost is about 1.1 to 1.4 lakh crore. Now the question is that why we are discussing about antimicrobial resistance? Why it makes the modern medicine riskier? Surgeries, chemotherapy, and transplantation and intensive care will fail if microbes become resistant to antibiotics. Now, the central problem is that the unequal access to health evidence-based related information creates knowledge gap. Like when people rely on social media misinformation and informal peer networks, they take antibiotics without any prescription and self-medication, incorrect dosage, or without consultation of any medical professional. The pathway to the AMR is unequal access to reliable information, proceed to the poor health literacy and understanding, which leads to self-medication and irrational use, which ultimately leads to antimicrobial resistance. Now, bridging communication inequalities and improving health literacy are essential to promote responsible antibiotic use and curb the growing threat of AMR. Now we come to my research objectives. Now, why I made this paper? To examine how inequalities in science communication influence public understanding, antibiotic misuse, and antimicrobial resistance in urban India. So, for this objective, I have divided them into 5 sub-objectives, which is to analyze how unequal access to reliable scientific and health information affect antibiotic-related awareness, knowledge, and behavior in urban populations. To examine the difference of different communication channels, including healthcare professional, social media, and informal peer networks about antibiotic use and decision making. To understand how misinformation, low health literacy can contribute to self-medication and incomplete treatment and other irrational antibiotic use behaviors. To explore the socio-communicational dimensions of antimicrobial resistance in context of WHO reports, AMR surveillance data, and ICMR surveillance data. And lastly, to emphasize the importance of inclusive, accessible, and audience-sensitive science communication data to improve public engagement and curb the antimicrobial resistance in India. Now, my overall aim is to highlight how communication inequalities and health literacy can contribute to reduce and the antibiotic misuse and growing threat of AMR. Now, the research questions. The main research question is how do inequalities in science communication influence antibiotic misuse in antimicrobial resistance in India? Information access, communication channels, socio-economic disparities, misinformation and literacy, and communication strategies are all my questions. Which is how do we access to reliable antibiotic-related information contribute to people's behavior towards antibiotics? And what role do communication channels like social media and other informal peer networks help in shaping the antibiotic use literacy? And how do education and socioeconomic disparities lead to affect AMR literacy and antibiotic misuse? And how does misinformation and poor health literacy contribute to self-medication and antibiotic use? Which leads to communication strategies like the literature insight and the theoretical framework, which will answer all my questions. Like the first communication inequality theory by Vishwanath, which is an hypothesis. According to this hypothesis, higher socio-economic group will acquire more knowledge as compared to lower socio-economic group, and which widens the gap between the unprivileged and the privileged ones, and which comes to the next theory, which is the health literacy framework by Nutbeam. It consists of 3 levels, which is the functional literacy, the interactive literacy, and the critical literacy. The functional literacy, antibiotics. The interactive literacy, which we are doing now, like the interaction. And the critical literacy is the thinking and like the promote the antibiotic use and curb the antibiotic misuse. And there is number 3 hypothesis, which is the knowledge gap hypothesis by Tickner et al., which supports the communication inequality theory, like the information spreads unevenly across social groups. So at last is the WHO action plan, which tells to improve awareness and understanding. These are supported by some key evidence, like 88% there is global awareness gap and rising resistant burden, which is 1 in 6 in India, and the India self-medication rate due to lower strict drug regulation, which is 65%, and India's poor health literacy rate, which is 55%. Now, how we have written this paper? This is a systemic secondary literature review which consults several papers like WHO GLASS reports, WHO AMR reports, ICMR AMRSN reports, peer reports, and communication reports. So now I have taken 6 steps of filtration like literature collection, screening and source validation, data extraction, comparative analysis, and interpretation through communication framework and evidence-based conclusions. Now this comes to the key findings that the lower is the root cause is the communication inequality and the low health literacy, which you can see by these numbers. And the major is the self-medication, which should be curbed. So to like my future use will be like to stricter drug, not only stricter drug regulation, and there should be communication gaps which should be fulfilled. Like there should be communication between the unprivileged and the privileged ones, so that they get educated. The challenge is not antibiotic availability. It's like to promote understanding and take actionable steps about curbing antimicrobial resistance. Thank you.
So, greetings to the chair and everyone present here. I'm Sahil Mishra, and the title of my presentation is Narratives of Eraser, How Policy Language Silences Trans Identities in India's Transgender Amendment Act, which has recently been passed last month, 2026. To give you a brief background of the whole study itself, so the journey started with 2024 in the Supreme Court judgment of Nalsa versus Union of India, where the Supreme Court granted the right to be a legitimate human to all the non-binary identities, including transgender, intersex, and other identities to exist in India with all the respect, dignity, and privacy. However, in the recent 2026, amendment bill, so the identity or the legitimate identity has been restricted to only 3 identities, which has been a degrade from the earlier judgment of the Supreme Court. So presently, there are only few traditional identities like Kinnar, Anuj, Arivan, all these identities which are legitimate to exist as transgender. People who have biological defects or any intersexual happenings that are happening. So these are the few identities where this bill has been restricting the overall communication. So why the study matters? The first point is certainly the research gap, because the bill was passed last month only. So which is why there is a whole research gap which is yet to prove where does this bill impacts in real life. Then there is also a question of now the real transgender and the fake transgender. This is coming from an example of one of the interviews where a transgender woman was asked to get up from a woman reserved seat in a bus to prove whether she is a real transgender or not. And how this consequence is not only in the legal system, but also in terms of everyday recognition, access, and dignity. So the main problem over here lies that the policy language does not just describe the trans identities, it also actively restricts them. Across the interview, participant describes symbolic erasure and how they understand, what they understand from the Amendment Act itself, how that shaped their identity, belonging, and what is the impact of such things over their emotional well-being, social well-being, and institutional well-being. So the methods that were used was a qualitative analysis to understand the 6 unstructured interviews taken from the community members, analyzed through reflexive thematic analysis to get the initial quotes and the major themes. So now I'll directly jump to the themes itself. So the first theme that came up here was how self-identification, which was guaranteed by the Supreme Court of India, have been turned to state-managed gender, where recognition have been restricted to only a few certain traditional identities rather than a holistic idea of what a gender could be. For this, one of the statements over here is identity is always in a flow, and this act puts identity in a watertight compartment, because now if somebody has to prove if they are transgender or not, they have to appear in front of the medical board and a district magistrate to prove if their genitals match to the legal system of India or not. Apart from that, the second theme is that how the idea of transgender or gender fluidity has been restricted to only few traditional identities. Because now, as I already discussed, that how transgender is only restricted to a few traditional identities, trans men are totally excluded from the whole system. So the Indian legal system does not recognize trans men as real transgenders anymore. Apart from that, it also restricts people who do not confine or take the membership of traditional transgender communities like Kinnar or Hijra community. Next is how this is becoming a lived exclusion policy, because there have been instances where now people are being questioned about their previously existing trans identity card, where now Aadhaar card is being demanded again. And also how job roles, even educational facilities are being denied because there is some incongruency between the presenting gender and also, or the expressed gender, and the documentation that they have present with them. Now, the emotional life has also been at toll, considering that all of the interviews have expressed their hopelessness, that how they don't feel anymore the legal citizens of India, because their identity have been removed from the overall domain of the socio-political scenario. And lastly, how this overall identification, while this whole thing was going on, while I was working with the Vartha Trust, we tried filing different petitions and even sending requests to the parliament. But the overall awareness about what this whole act is about is very much limited to the urban upper class people of the community, and even not even within the heteronormative community of the society. So basically, the overall findings suggest that language is governance here. Recognition is totally uneven, restricted to a few identities. and how law enters everyone's daily life, considering restricting their overall expression, freedom and privacy. And lastly, to conclude, so this is not just a legal reform. This reform was brought by giving the justification that a lot of misuse of the trans identity has been happening. But when an RTI was filed to get the information of how many misuse has been reported, there was no response from the authority. So, and even Indian Psychiatric Society has condemned the whole act, considering that this is again repathologizing the whole identity or gender fluidity in Indian context. So thank you, and I'm open to any questions and discussion. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Priyanka Roy, a research scholar from University of North Bengal, Department of Mass Communication. Today, I'm here to present my research paper titled Rethinking Identity in Digital Culture, Instagram Reels and the Mediated Self as a Vehicle of Participation, Performance and Power. So in today's digital culture, short video formats have transformed how people communicate, share aspects of themselves, and construct identities. And among these platforms, Instagram Reels has become a popular space where creators and individuals share and perform aspects of themselves, uh, perform aspects of themselves. Uh, sorry. Okay. Yes. In India, especially, 92% of users prefers Instagram Reels over other social media short form video formats, and among these 95% users, engage with Instagram Reels daily. Hence, Instagram Reels. No, second slide only. Hence, Instagram Reels in India only contribute to 25% Instagram Reels, digital Instagram Reels, digital traffic. And statement of the problem. The Instagram Reels format produces basically three major modalities of the self, of the mediated self, the performative self, the participatory self, and the surveilled self. And in this research paper, uh, I examined how these three modalities are performed and in what ways both at the same time. The research objectives of my paper are to analyze how Instagram Reels and the mediated self uh, uh, are dynamic vehicles power through Instagram Reels, how users negotiate, resist, and subvert and internalize dominant social, cultural, and platform-driven power structures through practices of self-engagement and self-presentation. To examine how everyday digital practices on Instagram Reels reflect, influence broader cultural, social, and political transformations in contemporary Indian society. My research questions and research objectives are quite similar because they are derived from the same research problem. For theoretical framework, this research draws upon four key theoretical perspectives, aiding government's dramaturgical model to understand the performative self through backstage, front stage performance, impression management, and the curated self, Michel Foucault's analytics of power, knowledge, and digital panopticon to understand how power circulates through everywhere, not only from top to down, and digital panopticon to understand the surveilled self and the formation of the subject. Henry Jenkins' participatory culture to understand the participatory self through content creation and audience engagement, and Stuart Hall's encoding decoding model to understand the discursive framework, how users create meaning and interpret and negotiate. For methodology, I used a multi-method approach, critical discourse analysis, and multimodal critical discourse analysis, perform architecture analysis and semi-structured interviews of Indian users with minimum 1,000 followers. For samples and sampling, I used purposive sampling. Focusing mainly on 70 Instagram reels created by Indian users, which represents gender, linguistic, and regional diversity. My key findings are Instagram reels demonstrates a tension between its enabling and disciplining functions, how it offers opportunities to individuals to express themselves, and how it limits them through platform algorithms and societal expectations and norms. The study also finds the need for algorithm literacy and platform awareness so that users understand why certain contents get viral and why certain are left behind. This study also highlights how non-Western contexts like India bring unique perspectives to understanding identity and digital expression in today's culture. Hereby, this research paper states how Instagram Reels are not only a mini packet of entertainment, but also dynamic channels through which individuals participate and performs identities and aspects of themselves, and how through performing identity they examine power culture and how these cultures are shaped in today's digital society. Thank you.
Hello.
Hello. So my topic is a study on public perception of fact-checking websites as a social transformation tool. So when we talk about fact-checking websites, the main concern behind taking this topic was that whether we are aware about these websites, whether we know what is fake news, whether we know what is misinformation. As we can see, there is rapid growth of social media platforms such as Instagram, Facebook, Google websites. There are so many information. Google is flooded by so many new platforms. So as we can see, the spread of misinformation and disinformation is rising day by day. So for that, the main problem that came out, like there is spread of misinformation because of the rising number of social media users, because everyone is running after people want to get into limelight, right? People want to get more views, people want to get more comments, so everyone is rising. So the reason behind taking this topic was to find out whether we are aware about these fact-checking websites or not, whether these users are aware, whether they know how to use these fact-checking websites and use them in their content. So as we can see, the problem behind this is there are limited number of audiences who actually fact-check What is fact checking? Fact checking means when we are sharing any kind of information, before that what we are doing is we are just checking whether the particular information is right or wrong. That is what we call fact checking. Okay, there are few objectives which I came to my mind when I was thinking about this topic. The first one was to analyze verification techniques and patterns used by these consumers. Who are consumers? The consumers are people who consume news on a regular basis. So the first thing that came to my mind was the government fact-checking website, that is PIB Fact Check. So I have taken PIB Fact Check primarily for my research. The second objective was to understand audience perception towards misinformation and fake news. Whether the audiences know what they are sharing, just to find out whether they are aware or not. The third objective was to investigate the relationship between media literacy and audience acceptance. Whether people are literate or they are just randomly spreading whatever they are getting. So the first research question was how do Indian social media engage with and respond to fact-checking websites. So for my first research question, what I did, I have taken 15 posts from PIB Fact Check. From those posts, I have first found out what are the main basic criteria they are divided. First, AI generated deep fake videos. There are websites like PIB is a website. There they just give the quotation. They just publish the news by telling that whether particular news is AI generated or particular news is a misleading news or it is a fake news or it is a false news. For that, I have taken 15 posts from PIB. On an average, it is found that the average views of this news is 47,000 views. The second question was, how aware are users about fact-checking websites in India? Coming to this question, it is found that people are not that aware. People don't even know, 40% people are not even aware about these fact-checking websites, but still they are just randomly sending their information sharing news on a random basis. So the first thing that came to my mind was to make them aware. The third question is, what verification practices are generally chosen by social media users? It is found that even if 60% people are aware about this fact-checking website, still it is found that maximum of them compare multiple news sources instead of using fact-checking website, which is again a very big problem. Coming to the fourth research question, does higher media literacy increase acceptance of misinformation correction or not? Have you heard about any of these? When I have asked this question, have you heard about this? Then the main thing that came out was fake news. People know about fake news, but people don't know how to fact check them. I have used uses and gratification theory. When we talk about uses and gratification theory, means what people know and how they use the information in the dissemination process. For my research, I have used mixed research design, where I have taken, for my content analysis, I have taken 15 posts, and for my quantitative analysis, I have taken 95 respondents. I have done a survey on that. I have taken 95 respondents. Coming to my findings, it is found that daily visitor fact-checking website is least. That is least. People think these websites reduce misinformation, but people don't use this misinformation. Okay. Coming to the point, people are under the impression that government and media should take stronger action against fake news, but we need to understand this, that being a user, we are not even using these fact-checking websites. Coming to the conclusion, media literacy appears to positively influence the acceptance of misinformation correction and fact-checking interventions. Fact-checking websites have significant potential to function as a social transformation tool, but unfortunately, this tool is not used properly by the fact-checking websites and the users. Thank you.
Hello, hello, hello. Hello, hello.
Good afternoon to the Honorable Session Chair and all the people present here. We are from the Department of Journalism and Mass Communication, Alia University. And here is the title of our presentation. Communication, which includes the sender and receiver, two very basic elements, is an integral process of our daily lives. Irrespective of culture, values, and beliefs, communication works verbally or non-verbally. We cannot eradicate the cultural aspects, though bracketing those values, beliefs, and schema is possible to avoid some biases. Communicating through lens here strongly implies that media and representation lens, a specific analytical framework where we have tried to find out underlying meanings. India is a country rich in culture. Here, Loko Sangskriti is a known thing. Baul, Gombhira, Potochitra, Jhotichita, and many more are there. From stage performances to the big screens, Satyajit Ray's Pother Pachali, to Hamdil Dechuke Sanam's Dholitaro Dhol Baje, Garba and Dandiya, to Turkish and Anatolian folk song Maya Maya from the movie Guru, Bengali film Bohurupi, which emphasized the Bengali folk culture. Imtiaz Ali's Tamasha, the name itself is associated with the Marathi folk theatre.
After reviewing the literatures, we have understood that the previous studies have explored folk media and cinema independently. Researchers may have explored both, but mainly identified folk as part of the popular culture. Limited research examines the intersection in contemporary Bombay cinema narratives through a communication perspective. Our paper argues that folk forms function as a powerful communicative tool that enable culture accessibility and foster social consciousness in the above-mentioned movies. These folk forms have been used as the visual language of those films to convey messages to the audiences and not only to entertain them. Our theoretical framework for the research paper is the participatory model of communication in terms of defining folk media as part of development communication and the ritual view of communication by James Carey. Methodology used for this analysis is the content analysis and semiotic analysis, and further we plan to conduct focus group discussions for further investigation.
Barfi. Anurag Basu's Barfi implies Khamoshi bhi pyar ki zuba hoti hai, an art of silent storytelling. Basu has used the integration of Bengali folk media, in specific Purulia, West Bengal's Chou Nach, to express themes and underlying meanings. This movie's female protagonist Jhilmil with autism, Basu has used dancers, Chou dancers, to create an imaginary world for her, to reveal her desires, her unspoken and scattered thoughts. For the first time, when Jhilmil witnessed a Chou dance performance, she was elated and surprised and imagined herself within the periphery of those particular masked dancers. Towards the end of the film, Basu again used Chou dancers in the wedding sequence, traditional Bengal attire, Chou as metaphor of their unfolding lives, their lifelong happiness. Another film, Jagga Jasus, firmly incorporates folk forms and references, not only part of the film's aesthetic, but also presenting literal meanings. The lead, Jagga, uses chondo to express his feelings, words, and emotions. Jagga has a stammer and sings his dialogue to speak fluently. Taler chonde taler dola, golpo bole chelebela. Assam's Bihu dance performance is also incorporated as a part of songs where dhol, pepa, toka related to folk has been used. And also we can witness Shukumar Ray's nonsense.
Another movie by Basu, Ludo, uses folk media as a thematic backbone to connect its four interwoven stories. The film itself is named after the traditional game Ludo, which serves as a metaphor for fate and unpredictability of life. Basu employs the folk concept of the Shutradhar by portraying himself as Yamraj, and humorous interactions introduced characters and guide the narrative. Another significant folk element appears through a ventriloquist protagonist who performs through dolls, reflecting a traditional performance art rooted in folk entertainment. Folk media is most visually prominent in the storyline where Rajkumar Rao plays Supranikha in Ram Leela performance. The sequence highlights the traditional costumes, elaborate makeup, and exaggerated folk acting associated with the folk theatre from Ram Leela. Basu further enriches the film with folk references such as the song Oh Beta Ji, the appearance of Bahupriyas and colorful festival imageries, using these elements to blur the boundaries between reality and performance. To conclude, folk culture is closely associated with less aware common people, where no one here teaches art and art originates. The origin of folk culture remains in the festivals, education, religion, loneliness, joy, sorrow, emotions, entertainment, and health of lok, or the common people. Communicating through folk media in movies makes the film narrative more interesting. The recent use of folk films in the movies and the OTTs makes the film narrative more interesting and helps audiences understand several perspectives of folk media. This paper argues that Anurag Basu's Barfi, Jagga Jasoos, and Ludo engage with folk forms not merely at the level of aesthetics, but as significant communicative devices embedded within the cinematic context. The use of folk media in these films reflects the continued relevance of indigenous cultural expressions with contemporary popular cinema, where they function as carriers of collective memory, social meanings, and narrative depth. Through the incorporation of folk traditions into modern cinematic practices, Basu's films show how vernacular storytelling forms continue to negotiate questions of identity, social experience, and cultural continuity in an increasingly globalized media context. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Tanushree Dash. I am going to present my paper. Good afternoon. শোনা যাচ্ছে? Good afternoon, everyone. I am Tanushree Dash. I am going to present my paper titled Work, Inequality and Everyday Life, a case study of women flower seller from Thakurnagar. I briefly discuss the background of the study, the methodology, the key findings, and the conclusion. Background and context of the study. This study is based in Thakurnagar, Gaighata block, North Chobbish Pargona, West Bengal, where floriculture is a key source of livelihood. A significant section of the local population depends on the flower cultivation and trade for income. Women are centrally involved in collecting, transporting, and selling flower in urban markets. Hello? This study is based in Thakurnagar, Gaighata block, North Chobbish Pargona, West Bengal, where floriculture is a key source of livelihood. A significant section of the local population depends on flower cultivation and trade for income. Women are centrally involved in collecting. Hello. Okay. Their work support household livelihoods and contribute to the local economy while also offering a degree of economic independence. The occupation involved continuous labor, mobility, and demanding daily routine. Problem statement, this study emerged from concern regarding labor intensity, labor invisibility, limited economic returns, occupational inequality, and everyday discrimination experienced by women flower sellers. Research object, to explore everyday labor experience of women flower sellers, to understand gender-based work inequality, to examine social perception toward informal women labors. Research question, how do women flower sellers experience occupational inequality in their everyday lives? How does society perceive and evaluate their labor in informal work settings? What challenges do they face in public and workspace during their daily occupational practice? How is occupational hierarchy socially constructed, and what factors shape the perception of formal labor as superior of informal labor? Literature insight. For this study, I have mainly reviewed three types of research work. The first one discussed the relationship between women education, mobility, empowerment, and the work, showing how social and economical conditions influence women participation in labor. The second study focused on urban informal labor, highlighting issues of job insecurity and lack of social recognition. The third type of research looks at women's participation in informal livelihoods, where work is understood as an important means of everyday survival. Together, these studies help me better understand the broader context of informal labor and women's work experience. Methodology. This study is based on a documentary project on women flower seller. The paper emerged from the field work I conducted during the documentary shooting process in Thakurnagar. I observed their daily work practice closely and interact with them informally during the field visit. Along with that, I also conducted informal interview to understand their life experience. So the study is based on visual observation and real-time field engagement rather than a formal survey-based method. Key findings. The first finding is that women flower seller do very hard and physical work. Their day start at night. They travel long distance by local train, collect flowers, sell them in different market, and return home very late. Even after that, they again prepare for the next day. This creates a continuous cycle of heavy physical labor with very little rest. The second finding is that this work is closely linked to daily survival. For most women, flower selling is their main source of income. The money is used for basic family needs like food and household expenses. So this is not optional, it is necessary for everyday survival. The third finding is about low income and economic insecurity. Even though they work for long hours, they earn very little money. Customers usually expect cheap price and do not value their effort. So there is a clear gap between hard work and low return. The fourth finding is occupational inequality and social hierarchy. Informal jobs like flower selling are often seen as less important than formal occupation. This perception is influenced by factors such as education, economic level, and the belief that mental work is more valuable than physical labor. As a result, these workers are often denied the respect given to higher paid or formal professions, despite their essential contribution to urban life. The study also found that this inequality is reinforced through everyday interaction and communication practice, reflected in the way workers are addressed, treated, and perceived in public space. The fifth finding is about gender challenge. Women travel early morning or night and work in public space that are mostly male dominated. Along with this, they also handle household work. This creates a double burden of work and responsibility. The last finding is about job insecurity. They do not have fixed workplace. They work in temporary roadside space that can be removed anytime. There is no formal protection, so their work life is uncertain. Overall, the study shows that urban flower supply depends on women's invisible and highly labor-intensive work, which is socially undervalued and economically insecure. Uh, in conclusion, the study shows that women flower sellers play an essential role in sustaining everyday urban life, yet their work often remains undervalued and overlooked. The study further suggests that this occupational inequality is shaped not only by economic condition but also through everyday communication and social perception. Recognizing the dignity and significance of informal labor is therefore an important social concern. Thank you.
So very good afternoon, everyone. I am Dr. Ranu Tomar. So it's a relief to be a last presenter for the day for all of you and for me also. I just reached in the morning. So this presentation and this particular paper emerged out of my own teaching experiences in the Delhi classroom or NCR classroom, where I found that how particular subject or curricula, which is on gender and communication, is taken by boys or male student. So the context of the study is basically when the incorporation of gender and communication is done, how gender sensitive curricula shape minds of the student, specifically male students, which remain, I would say, underexplored participants from gender studies point of view. I will not say they haven't been criticized enough in the name and in the structure of patriarchy, but yeah, my core is to shift the lens a bit to understand from their perspective. Critical engagement, which can foster better media practices when they become professional to cover the issues and understand the narrative. And of course, how classroom opportunities create conscious dialogic process to sensitize student. So why specifically male student, I have explained. One term which I still remain stuck with is basically, I won't say that how do they negotiate power relation, but I would say how do they unconsciously replicate the patriarchal power relation wherever they are. So be it in the classroom or be it in the media practice, how the same hierarchy is operated while making particular gender under the oppression category or suppressed category. Need to understand pedagogical approaches in the classroom and how the possibility of social intervention emerges. So critical self-reflection of male students. So in this study, I have tried to take their narratives, specifically asking and making them right that why you think that you should study a paper on gender and communication in your curricula if you are a student of mass media or you are a media scholar. Research objective very clearly, how male students construct notion of neutrality, process of self-reflection and unlearning gender biases in the classroom, identify pedagogical practices that can foster allyship and professional accountability also. Research question, of course, trying to align with the objective, construction of gender and understanding gender neutrality. How does hegemonic masculinity shape in the classroom engagement? What ways students negotiate their privilege and self-reflection, and whether classroom has been able to tell them critical accountability, and what role do dialogical learning spaces play in transforming gender perspective. Very importantly, I have selected these scholarly work borrowing from R.W. Connell, specifically concept of hegemony, Paulo Freire, where he stresses on the experiences and how the vocabulary and experience should become the narrative for the learner. Bell hooks, where engaged pedagogy is very important in the classroom. And I think as a practitioner of academia, classroom is the most liberated place for the one who is learner from this side and the one who is learning from that side also. And of course, Donald Allen Shawn, reflective practitioner, what we are learning or teaching, how much we are able to reflect on that same. Methodology, I clearly told that I gave student questions and I asked them to write very clearly, giving them time and days to give me in writing. And student narrative and reflections became the key data source. Then I did thematic analysis, and of course it was through the classroom program where I have informed that this is going to be part of the research paper, which is very intentionally I want to study from you. Key findings, after very carefully reading, analyzing their journaling and their narratives, I found that how they mix neutrality and objectivity together. So they are unable to understand that what kind of patriarchal power they have, and unconsciously they are in the same power while saying that we do not need to bother about any other gender except us because we are the authority. Patriarchal socialization is there, and reflexive learning omits those blur lines that how we can settle in the practice. Dialogic pedagogy help them to make them feel uncomfortable. They give a thought and they could not dismiss that now we can escape from this answer. We have to know through the curricula we are answerable and we are accountable also. And allyship, I'm stressing this word. Why? Because critical inquiry is necessary. If that graduate is going to be a media practitioner, are we going to expect the same hierarchy in the media spaces or in the newsroom or any other media workplace? So that is why emergence of allyship came as a possibility. I wonder if throughout the decades we have taught girls and boys or any other gender, how is it possible that only girls became sensitive and boys remain insensitive completely, or some number of boys, not all, but some number of boys. So we need to consciously address it. Discussion and conclusion, I would borrow from their journaling that pedagogy can transform if consciously we apply and we engage them in dialogic process rather than forcing them that it is coming from NEP or particular policy of education. That's why they need to study gender and communication paper. And also, they need to emerge as a bridge to change the narrative while covering the story, while selecting the topic, and transferring it for the next learner, be it workplace or be it the classroom. Just adding that gendered inequalities cannot be solved only by particular gender. It is the collective work of all the learners, irrespective of age and education or class caste. Thank you so much.
Thank you all presenters for the insightful presentations today and thought-provoking contributions. We have now come to the end of the paper contribution presentations for this session. At this point, I would like to open the floor for discussions and question answer session. I invite members of the audience to share their questions, comments, and observations about the presentations, if anybody has.
So I have, can I ask collectively? So I have 3 questions. First, for the first presenter, where you mentioned about the science communication through your scientific background, right? So I want to know that how do you suggest public understanding of scientific communication through your paper? I couldn't get that clearly. Second question is for you both. You have taken multiple data from various films of various timeline. So I want to know how do you do justice selecting folk songs or folk media from various timeline of the films of Bollywood or particular language of cinema. So what rationale you will suggest for that? And last question for you, where you mentioned PIB as the data site. How do you rationalize that users are educated enough to understand that fact check can be a transformative tool for them? That's it, sir. Thank you. Yes, yes, sir. Yes. No, no, no. I came after, I think, 15, 10 minutes. 10 minutes or 15 minutes.
First of all, my paper is not about like spreading the knowledge of antibiotic. It's about that to being the public awareness about antibiotic misuse and use. Like we can promote some science-related workshops and like other all workshops where we can like educate people about use and misuse of antibiotics. Like in India, it's more prevailing like the self-medication. Like people use the old medicine reports and all prescription to again and again take the medicine. And there is no proper medicinal professional to explain it. So my paper suggests that to bridge the gap between the communication of the people. Hope I have understood your question. Thank you.
The answer is, ma'am, we have not taken a particular timeline or something like that. We have focused on Anurag Basu's 3 films, that is Barvi, Jagga Jasus and Ludo, how he has incorporated those folk forms in his movies, not aesthetically, but as communicative tools. Yes, obviously this can affect, but we have not focused on that perspective. We only just focused on a particular perspective. And I think further we should think about it. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So I think your question was how am I checking media literacy, right? Through of users through PIB. So basically, I am not trying to find out whether how much media literate people are. What I'm trying to find out, like whether these government websites, like PIB is a government website, so this website is used by the audiences or not. Whether users are using this government website or not. That is my question. That was the whole thing that I tried to find out. No, no, no. It is unlimited. Like you can log in, you can directly log in, and you'll get the update. There are private fact checking websites also. I'm just trying to check social media users' presence on internet platforms, presence and whether how much they are using these platforms. That's it. Thank you.
Uh, yeah, so now I would like to open the floor to our esteemed professor.
Well, চলছে? I enjoyed listening to 7 of these papers. They are very varied, quite interesting. Uh, I think we had some sound problems. That's why some of the presenters were not very clearly audible, but more or less the presentations was good. Before I, sort of talk about some of the presentation, one thing is common that most of you have talked about your research structure, the objectives and what methodology you have adopted, and that's required, everything. But you need to keep in mind that you are under a thematic frame. You have been asked how this digital culture, new digital culture, is part, whether it is really creating some social inequality. There are, some of you have talked about inequality, like Aditya, I think, Shohil also to some extent. Then, though Tonusri was a little bit inaudible, but it is directly work and inequality. But others, I doubt whether it is basically, it has anything to do with inequality. For example, the fact-checking part, I don't think it has anything to do with inequality. The thing is, you have to be a little bit careful about what theme you have been given or where you are writing. If the theme doesn't come, it has to, somewhere or the other, the topic has to be, your presentation is very good. The folk structures that you talk about on Ragbasu's film, but it has nothing to do with the social inequalities. If you could explain, those things are not there in the presentation. When you are explaining about the presentations, about its structure, it has a common structure, an objective, what methodology you're taking, what are the findings. Here, some of you have already done the work, some have you just planned to do it, that you will do it or this is the way you will be doing, that's fine. But actually, whether if you have done something or in the process of doing it, you should be on, when you are presenting here, when you are doing the research paper, that's a different thing. Doing the research paper or writing the research paper, and then when you are presenting to an audience, you have to make it clear that what are you aiming at? What is actually you are giving some effort to, sort of work on that. Just explaining this is the method I'm doing it, or this is the references I'm doing it, that's not enough. You have to focus on this is what I intend to. If you haven't done the research, you would like to do the research, then you do say that this is what I intend to achieve. The objective has to be clear, and that is what you are presenting. The rest of it, when you are presenting, they are secondary. You can just mention. But you have to make it very clear that this is what I intend to do with all the research paraphernalia or everything. Otherwise, the presentation becomes a little bit dull for others also to follow. But otherwise, it's good. Everybody has done a very serious job. Only thing, the reference of, as I said, the theme, the main theme was exploring the inequality of digital media or the use of digital media or if you have not taken the digital media, even film media, whatever, if you have taken the inequality part has to be emphasized, has to be focused. Otherwise, you are not really addressing the theme of the research, of the presentation. Otherwise, it's good, well written and well structured, and I think they will be taking some steps to publish it or something. Only thing I'm surprised by the last I mean, this is the first time I hear that in a gender study, somebody taking interest in male students. I mean, whenever we talk about gender studies, it's maybe the interest of the female or, I mean, the problems of the female and everything. This is the first time I'm hearing that somebody doing a research paper just on male students, I mean, looking after the male students. I mean, I've seen in one of these television programs a lady who has been, I mean, everybody talks about human rights and female rights. There is one woman I've seen that he's very vehement with, you know, the male rights. The male also should have their rights. So I've just seen one person, and you are the second person who have been writing about or taking up a cause of the male, you know, I mean, of pedagogy. Yeah. Okay, so that, I mean, we conclude the session today. Group picture tak kar liya.
So with this, we come to the end of this session. We hope the exchanges during this session inspire further research and collaboration and dialogue. Thank you once again for your participation. We wish you an enriching experience for the remainder of the ICA Regional Hub Conference 2026. Before we conclude and disperse, I would like all of you, the presenters and our esteemed session chair, to kindly join in for a group picture.